are going to be watching Macaroni and Cheese from 1845. Before you ask, yes, I was alive, and I'm going to tell you if they make it the way I used to.
I've never met a mac and cheese I don't like. Whether it comes out of a blue box or is served with Gruyere and lobster.
Sometimes the blue box is even better than the Gruyere and lobster and Gouda and all that crap. Like, traditional. Poor people mac and cheese is what I grew up on, and it is way better.
Mac and cheese can do no wrong. And so I have high hopes for this 19th century mac and cheese recipe with the fancy name.
That's good.
Macaroni à la reine.
And that's like penne pasta, and I kind of like penne even though people are probably more rigatoni.
So thank you to Bright Sellers for sponsoring this video as we celebrate gastronomy's power couple, macaroni and cheese. This time on Tasting History.
Woohoo! Dude, let's start a debate before he even brings it up. Do you guys like when they put breadcrumbs on the top of your mac and cheese? I'm gonna be honest, it depends. Like, sometimes I don't like it. Or other times they'll put like Ritz crackers and that's pretty good. Yeah, it depends. Like, maybe breadcrumbs I feel like is like a event, like Thanksgiving. That's pretty good, because that calls for breadcrumbs, like a little bit of extra.
So if you look at early macaroni and cheese recipes, they tend to be very simple. Pasta, cheese, and butter. The channel Townsends did an excellent video on making one of these early 18th century recipes for mac and cheese, so I'll put a link to that in the description.
Nice.
But since John had already done the 18th century, I decided to move a little bit later to the 19th century when macaroni and cheese started to flex its muscles. And I found this recipe from 1845.
Dude, you're gonna have the mac and cheese in the same book as the cod head? I do like eating fish head, but that one looks a little terrifying. Like, that is a Slay the Spire boss.
For what I assume Eliza Acton thinks is macaroni and cheese fit for a queen, because she calls it macaroni à la reine.
Ooh.
This is a very excellent and delicate mode of dressing macaroni. Boil 8 ounces in the usual way, and by the time it is sufficiently tender, dissolve gently 10 ounces of any rich, well-flavored white cheese in fully 3/4 of a pint of good cream.
Dude, it's a little bit easier than you think. Like, something else that's also pretty easy once you learn how to do it is Alfredo sauce. And I love Alfredo sauce, but now that I know how to make it, when I try the jar one, it's like kind of not that good.
Add a little salt, a rather full seasoning of cayenne, from half to a whole saltspoon of pounded mace, and a couple of ounces of sweet fresh butter.
Okay, what is mace actually? I only know it as the thing I see on like body cams. What is mace for real? Oh, it's a spice? Like, do you just like give a little squirt on the top? Oh, it's a nutmeg shell. Oh, yeah, I knew it as a weapon.
The cheese should, in the first instance, be sliced very thin. It should be stirred in the cream without intermission until it is entirely dissolved and the whole is perfectly smooth. The cheese may be poured equally over the macaroni, thickly covered before it is sent to table with fine crumbs of bread fried to a pale gold color.
Okay, so the original was to use the bread. But like I said, sometimes you don't want to be bread.
Nothing too complicated in the process, and so it really comes down to what ingredients you're using. So let's start with the macaroni. Now, you can make your own at home, but you might run into the same problem that Thomas Jefferson did.
What?
So he actually wrote down a recipe for making macaroni along with a diagram of a pasta machine.
Dude, why is his handwriting actually pretty good? I thought it was gonna be more like but that's kind of beautiful.
And then he had one of those machines sent from Italy to America so he could have fresh pasta made for him. But he quickly realized that the pasta was inferior to that he had had in Italy and in France. And it all came down to the flour. He noted that the best macaroni in Italy is made with a particular sort of flour called semola.
Oh! Wait, guys, you know how I told you I go on like crazy Reddits all the time, like Tin Fish? Like, my new Reddit that I've been on is for people who make pizza. And they always say to use, I think it's semola flour on the bottom when you make the pizza dough. And then it adds like a little to it. Oh, that's semolina? Oh. Stupid word association, I hate you!
In Naples. So he ended up still importing pasta from Italy, which is actually how most people got their pasta for a very long time. And so, to be appropriate to the period, you're going to want a ½ pound or 225 grams of dried macaroni.
When do I put it in my hat?
The shape of which is really up to you, because at the time, macaroni could refer to pretty much any type of pasta. Eliza Acton even says that there is ribbon macaroni or lasagna. So the tube shape was becoming the standard when talking about macaroni. The one thing it would not have been is the elbow-shaped macaroni that we know today, because
elbow.
that wasn't made until a bit later. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you are choosing your pasta is that it's of a yellowish tint, by no means white, as one sees them when they are of inferior quality.
What?
So to prepare the pasta, she says to add a little salt and a bit of butter the size of a walnut to the boiling water before adding in the pasta.
I don't know if I've ever added butter before I add the pasta. Does that really do a lot? I mean, I definitely do the salt because that's what they told me to do on Food TV. But I have never added butter to water. That just seems like it doesn't even do anything.
Now, she and other cookbooks from the time say to boil the macaroni at a full rolling boil for 3/4 of an hour. And that's after it's often soaked for an hour or more in milk or water.
Wow.
So I'm going to guess that they very much liked the pasta to be much softer than we often have it today.
Ew, so they're eating like retirement home pasta. Just straight up squishing on the gums.
And the pasta was probably much thicker, so it did take longer to boil. Not entirely sure, but if you are going to boil it for a full 3/4 of an hour, that'll give you plenty of time to pop open a bottle of wine from today's sponsor, Bright Cellars.
Oh my God, I was gonna have a bottle of wine later and play poker with you guys.
And I gotta say, wine does go very well with mac and cheese.
I mean, if he likes wine, earlier there was a lot of traffic on my way to the gym. They ran out of one of my other favorite wines at the store, so I couldn't buy it. It was pretty bad.
Also goes really well with Thanksgiving pie. My dad, every year, the day after Thanksgiving, takes a lot of the leftovers and puts them into a pie and then bakes it. And it's absolutely fantastic. You get all the flavors all at once. And I always have it with a nice glass of Cabernet Sauvignon. Well, if you don't like Cabernet, that's okay, because with Bright Cellars, you take a quick 7-question quiz and they match you with wines from all over the world curated to your taste.
That's
the
cool.
wines show up at your door and you enjoy. I also love these little cards that they send with information about the different wines. A little education.
Dude, I used to be a bartender and I would have to like explain the wines to people, and we did like wine opening ceremonies where I had to go to the table. Then I would have to like pour them the bottle, and then they like swish it around and they like smell it and they like tongue it down and stuff. And the worst part was I had to describe it, and they tell you what to say. And they'll be like, oh, this wine has a deciduous floor and fallen leaves from the tropicals. It's kind of a lot of information.
With your libation. The cards tell you about the different flavors that you might find in the wine and where it's from, like this Cabernet from Chile with the whimsical name Dancing Juice. So whether you're going to be sharing this with holiday guests or if you're going to be keeping it all for yourself, give Bright Cellars a try by clicking the link in the description. And right now, Bright Cellars is giving viewers of Tasting History a limited time offer of $50 off of your first 6-bottle box. By just clicking the link in the description, you can get started today. And
the last time I had alcohol at somebody's house, my dad gave me a sip of his Assassin's Creed whiskey. I think that's what it was. And it was pretty watered down. Just like the series,
Not only do you get
Someone's
wine,
mad.
but you also get to support the channel. Now, there are 2 reasons to drink wine. And while you nurse that glass of insert favorite wine here, you can start your cheese sauce. And for that, what you'll need is 10 ounces or 285 grams of white cheese thinly sliced. Now, many old recipes call for Parmesan, but if Parmesan be used for it, it must be grated. But as we have said before, it will not easily blend with the other ingredients.
That is true, because my girly dinner that I have sometimes when I don't want to cook is I make a bunch of like just pasta, then I'll put butter in it, and then I'll put Parmesan, and that's it. And I just like mix it up until it makes that good noise. And it doesn't really play well sometimes. It'll be like stretchy, but also like gritty, but it's so good.
So as to be smooth, use whatever you want. I'm using white cheddar. 1 3/4 cup or 425 milliliters of cream, 4 tablespoons or 55 grams of unsalted butter,
Okay.
a half teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne, and
I'm so aggressively white. That would probably blow my tongue off. I don't know. I'm so bad with spices. Even if it's a teaspoon, I probably would have subbed that out.
a 1/4 teaspoon of mace. You'll also need some dried breadcrumbs. So first add the cream to a small saucepan and bring to a simmer. Then add the cheese and stir it in until fully melted, and then add the salt, the cayenne, mace, and the butter, and stir everything in. And you can add more or less cayenne and mace to your taste. At the same time, put the breadcrumbs in a dry pan and set them over low heat, keeping them moving so they don't burn.
Whoa, I'm gonna be honest, anytime they ask me to toast something before I put it on top, I skip that. I ain't got time for that.
You'll notice it can take a little while to get...
Okay, wait, what is this? 1 second. Did you hear about the guy who 2 bottles of the same wine, he decanted them as separately so no one but him knew. He then treated one decanter like cheap wine and the other like expensive. The only people who caught it were the people who just liked wine. The wine snobs acted like they were different. Dude, we watched a video about like wine sommelier people. And this guy, what he did was in his bathroom, he made prison wine, and then he also brought out a bottle of expensive wine, and he gave it to all of like the sommeliers, and like the sommeliers liked his prison toilet wine.
those breadcrumbs to that nice golden brown that you want, and yet it takes almost no time to go from golden brown to burnt. Now with the breadcrumbs, pasta, and cheese sauce all going at the same time, you might not think that this is a good time for a lecture on the history of macaroni and cheese, but here it is anyway. Pasta with cheese goes back at least to ancient Rome. Cato the Elder's placenta, which I've made here on the channel, is a...
That is kind of beautiful. Dude, presentation totally matters. Like, you would probably eat chocolate pudding, but if somebody brought you to a toilet and they dropped in some brownies in there, you probably wouldn't eat it. Like, be honest. You eating toilet brownies?
Essentially cheese between layers of a proto-pasta called tracta. By the Middle Ages, a dish with many of the same components begins to appear, lasagnes. The 14th century recipes usually call for pasta to be layered with cheese and then...
we bringing back the exclamation point disability. I'm not disabled! And there's nothing wrong with that, but why do we keep doing that? You're like the 3rd person to do that this week!
Pasta called tracta. By the Middle Ages, a dish with many of the same components begins to appear, lasagnes. The 14th century recipes usually call for pasta to be layered with cheese and then sweet spices like cinnamon and sugar. And the English form of curry from around 1390 has a recipe that just calls for pasta, butter, and cheese, and they call it macarons.
That's what I made.
In the mid-14th century, in the Decameron, Giovanni Boccaccio wrote of the town of Bengodi, a sadly fictional place where on a mountain, all of grated Parmesan cheese, dwell folk that do naught else but make macaroni and ravioli and boil them in capon broth.
For a long time, I thought Atlantis was real, speaking of imaginary places, and now everybody's gonna say, it is real! But what happened was I thought Atlantis was fake. Then my friend told me in middle school, she was like, we're going to Atlantis for, I guess it was like summer break. And I went, wait, what? You're going to Atlantis? I guess it's real. But it's actually a theme park. And like for a long time, I was like, damn, I mean, I guess it's real.
And he says they would roll the pasta down the Parmesan mountain where people would scramble to get their hands on this mythical medieval mac and cheese. Now, regional differences between macaroni also begin to appear. Naples, Genoa, Rome, they all had variations.
Okay, that's got to be on purpose. Naples and genitals. I mean, Genoa. See how easy it is?
In the flour quantity, the shape of the pasta, and in their preparation. In 1465, Maestro Martino's recipe for macaroni romaneschi calls for it to be plated with good cheese, butter, and sweet spices.
Ooh.
Similar flavors to the earlier recipe from England. And the macaroni connection between Italy and England is rather complex. It appeared in the form of curry in 1390, and then the first recipe called macaroni and cheese, or rather to dress macaroni with Parmesan cheese.
Okay, this is the second time I've seen macaroni spelled on the screen. Is it 2 C's or 1? I'm trying to see how to spell this correctly.
Appeared in Elizabeth Raffles' 1769, The Experienced English Housekeeper. But around that same time, there's a linguistic curveball thrown because in England, the term macaroni not only referred to pasta, but also to a type of fashion.
Wait, this is Yankee Doodle! I was talking about him earlier!
Doodle went to town
riding on a pony. He stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni.
Every American knows that song, and by the end of the American Revolution, it had become a patriotic ditty, but it actually started off as a bit of an insult to the colonists.
I didn't know it was like, I guess, hate. I just always said macaroni.
Some claim that it was a way to mock the colonists by saying that they were so uncouth that merely by putting a feather in their cap, they thought that they were fashionable.
Dude, I'm gonna be honest, if I saw somebody wearing that hat right now, I think they a little quirky, they a little fashionable. Ain't nobody wearing hats anymore, ain't nobody dressing whimsical, ain't nobody pulling on ponytails.
But I'm pretty sure it was actually a way to attack their masculinity. See, in the mid-18th century...
Okay, I guess that's why we got rid of it.
It became popular for the wealthy young men of England to take their grand tour, which was a lengthy trip around the European continent with a focus on the splendors of the Italian peninsula. While there, they would develop a taste for the finer things in life, elegant fashion, sophisticated manners, and an appreciation for top cuisine like the Italian macaroni. And similar to the Finer Things Club from The Office, these young sophisticates became members of what was called the Macaroni Club. And when they returned to England, they wore their ostentatious outfits and their bejeweled wigs.
Do you think those wigs smelt kind of bad? I always think about that. Like, there's got to be something up in there. You know they're wearing it every single day. After you style it, you definitely don't want to wash it. They had the stink.
And had there been a RuPaul's Macaroni race 250 years ago, they might have become cultural icons. But
okay, what is this? What? He put the link twice. I had to know. I had to know. 1 second. This is what he wanted to share with the class. Thank you.
But that is not how it turned out. Race 250 years ago, they might have become cultural icons. But that is not how it turned out. See, the style of dress coincided with a time where it was very popular to mock the wealthier classes, and the fashion just made it too easy. In 1770, the Oxford magazine declared, "There is indeed a kind of animal, neither male nor female, a thing of the neuter gender, lately started up among us. It is called macaroni. It talks without meaning, it smiles without pleasantry, it eats without appetite, it rides without exercise, it wenches without passion."
So have people been haters since, like, the dawn of time? Like, were cavemen beefing? Were they calling each other, like, ooga booga derogatory?
They were ahead of their time, and the style was short-lived, and the term macaroni returned to meaning pasta. But again, any pasta. Especially in Italy, any shape of pasta was still called macaroni. In fact, if you look at the many paintings and later photographs titled Macaroni Eaters, they are almost always Neapolitans eating long strands of pasta with their hands.
I don't think I've ever eaten pasta like that. Yeah, no, has anybody ever just, like, bukkake eaten pasta?
More like fettuccine or spaghetti today. And that may be what Thomas Jefferson saw when he visited Italy in 1787, though he had surely come in contact with macaroni being eaten with a fork when he was in Paris. When he moved to France in 1784, he brought along his enslaved chef, James Hemmings. And as Jefferson did his diplomat thing, Hemmings was learning the art of French cooking.
Oh, I was thinking of Hemingway. I got confused. Okay, wait, sorry.
He studied under several of France's greatest chefs at the time and is often considered to be the first American chef trained in France. And when they returned to America, Hemmings brought many of the recipes he learned with him, some of which Jefferson wrote down, like the macaroni. And I intend to do an entire episode on James Hemmings, but for the purpose of this episode, it's important to know that it was likely his macaroni recipe that helped make macaroni popular in the United States.
That's the guy! Can we get a clap? Him and John Chickenfinger actually got me through so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Because Thomas Jefferson pushed the dish on everyone. Shortly after he became president, Jefferson served a macaroni pie at a state dinner in 1802. Hemmings had passed away by then, but it was likely his recipe or a version of it that was used. And it's unclear if it had any cheese in it, and it wasn't actually a universal hit at first. One guest of the dinner, a member...
Who doesn't like cheese and noodles? Like, that's not a hard sell, is it?
Member of the House of Representatives, Reverend Manasseh Cutler, said, "February 6th, Saturday, dined at the President's. Dinner not as elegant as when we dined before."
We're leaving a Yelp review for the president?
Among other dishes, a pie called macaroni, which appeared to be a rich crust filled with the strillions of onions or shallots, which I took it to be, tasted very strong and not agreeable. Another guest was Meriwether Lewis of Lewis and Clark, and when Cutler asked about—
He was real? I'm sorry. Sometimes I can't tell if people are real or not, but that guy was actually real.
the onions in the dish, Mr. Lewis told me there were none in it. It was an Italian dish, and what appeared like onions was made of flour and butter with a particularly strong liquor mixed with them.
What?
So he doesn't mention cheese in the dish, but after dinner he says, "We drank tea and viewed again the great cheese."
The great cheese is actually huge. I know I keep talking about Slay the Spire, but I think that actually is an item. And Slay the Spire 2. And then you get like 1 level, you get 1 HP every time you end battle.
And at first I thought maybe he was talking about the macaroni dish, but no. Rather, it is a wheel of cheese that was given to Jefferson as a gift.
Oh, dude, and the cheese wheels too? I don't know if anybody here is old like me, but back in the day, I used to play Neopets, and I remember there was a game in Neopets where you would roll the cheese wheel as fast as you could down the hill. And then I think there was like a guessing element. I can't remember what you guessed. But yeah, the wheel of cheese.
And Jefferson kept it in its own like dedicated room, and people would travel for days just to have Jefferson invite them to the mammoth room and see the mammoth cheese.
I want to see it.
And if you think politics is divisive now, back then even the cheese was partisan, as the man who made it said that when it came to the milk used to produce the cheese, no federal cow must contribute a drop.
Get them cows out of my political cheese, damn! If this shit ain't woke, I ain't eating it!
And that might explain why Cutler was such a grump at the dinner, because he, like the unrepresented cows, was a Federalist. Now, while Cutler might have not been wooed by the macaroni, most of the population was, because it starts appearing in many, many of the early cookbooks from America, including The Virginia Housewife or Methodical Cook in 1824. It was written by Mary Randolph, and it does have cheese.
Dude, why was everybody taking profile pictures back in the day? Like, I'd be honest, my profile, not that great.
And the fact that Mary Randolph was a close cousin to Thomas Jefferson and spent time with the family makes me wonder if her recipe is not in some way influenced by a version that James Heming served 50 years earlier.
Yeah.
Now, macaroni at this point was still mostly being imported from Italy, so it wasn't inexpensive. And so the dish, rather than calling it simply macaroni and cheese, would often be given more elaborate names like
Penne la Parmesan, macaroni extra wealth. I don't know, I'm not bougie enough. Maybe supreme coated or BerryCrepe.
macaroni à la sauce blanche or macaroni à la reine, like the one that we're making today. And even as the price of pasta started to come down, it was still generally known as a rather luxurious dish among the wealthy.
Dude, times change like crazy though. Like, to me, mac and cheese is like my struggle meal, got me through college. I still eat it all the time. And like another one I can think of is like lobster. Like lobster used to be, I guess, like a poor dish, but then it turned into like a rich dish, right? Because people didn't want to eat like things crawling on the ground and eating dirt.
But there was a concerted effort to change this. In 1855, Alexis Soyer, one of Victorian England's most celebrated chefs,
I like his lips. I just... Wait.
wrote of vermicelli and macaroni. Pray, Eloise, why should not the workman and mechanic partake of these wholesome and nutritious articles of food, which have now become so plentiful and cheap? Macaroni is now selling in London at 5 pence per pound and makes 4 pounds of food when boiled.
Macaroni, only rich people food. Forever and ever and ever and ever. Now I feel classy when I eat it out of the little microwavable cup.
And it took a while, but eventually it did become accessible to the masses. But once everyone was eating it, it kind of lost its appeal amongst the wealthy, and so the fancy French-named macaroni and cheeses fell off of the menus of nicer restaurants, especially those in the northern United States. But in the southern United States, it remained rather popular, especially amongst the African-American population. This is also where we start to see that divide between Southern soul food style of macaroni and cheese.
Oh, I love when it's a little goofy. Actually, I have favorite shitty mac and cheese. Does that make sense? Like, people hate KFC mac and cheese. I love it. I love that it's extra slop. And my other favorite slop mac and cheese is from Wawa.
Cheese, which is made with real cheese, and the boxed version that's made with processed cheese. And for the evolution of that processed macaroni and cheese, we actually have to go to Switzerland, because both the macaroni and the cheese started there.
Really?
Because both the macaroni and the cheese started there. It was in Lucerne in 1872 that elbow-shaped macaroni was first produced. And completely unrelated, in 1911, it was two Swiss food chemists who were looking for a way to extend the shelf life of Emmentaler cheese that came up with the first processed cheese.
Wait, they didn't use Swiss cheese? Is that where Swiss cheese is from, or is this all a lie?
Basically, cheese takes a while to mature, but then once it is, it goes bad really, really quickly.
Ew, I hate blue cheese. I'm sorry, there's probably fans, but it's actually disgusting. And the worst part about blue cheese was back in the day when I had to prep for the bar, I would take, they're called blue cheese olives that people like with their martinis. I had to get handfuls of olives and stuff them with blue cheese. Oh my God, I think that's actually why I hate it. I have cheese PTSD. PTS cheese.
And can become poisonous if you eat it. And so they would melt it down to kill all of the bacteria and mold, and then add sodium citrate.
What?
That would keep the melted cheese from separating, and then it could be resolidified into a block of...
Oh, wait, is that the powder that's in the mac and cheese that you put in the microwave? I always wondered what that was, and they're like, do not dump the powder.
Processed cheese. But did the Swiss put their elbow macaroni and processed cheese together? No, it took a Canadian to do that.
Oh,
James
Canada.
Lewis Kraft.
Literally. Wait, isn't that you guys' song? That was not intentional, but that's pretty funny.
Was born in 1874 and grew up on his family's dairy farm in Stevensville, Ontario. In 1903, he went into the wholesale business when he moved to Chicago and started selling cheese to grocers off of the back of a rented horse-drawn wagon.
Wow.
The issue was with cheese's short shelf life, he had trouble selling in bulk, and during the summer, without refrigeration, he had trouble selling it at all. So doing a little research, he came across the same process that the Swiss had and melted it down and then added sodium phosphate, which seemed to work better for his cheddar. He canned the cheese.
Oh, wait, that was cute. Better for his cheddar. I love Mr. Kraft. Thank you, Mr. Kraft. I mean, now that I said that, somebody's going to tell me he, like, committed 5 crimes, and now I have no idea, and I take it back.
And sold it in bulk all year round. And in 1916, he patented the process just before America went into World War I. That's when he sold 6 million pounds of Kraft cheese to the American government to be sent unspoiled to the front lines in France.
Wow.
The cheese business boomed. He expanded and bought Velveeta in 1927, but still...
Oh, shit! Dude, there's this thing I make for every party, and you guys should make it because it's actually so easy. It's just Velveeta and then Rotel, and then you can also put meat in it, and it's actually so good. I love Rotel dip.
Still, the marriage between macaroni and processed cheese had yet to be realized. But then the Great Depression hit.
No!
The story goes that during the Depression, Grant Leslie, a Scottish salesman working in St. Louis, Missouri, was selling his pasta, and to make it more enticing, would put a rubber band around it with a packet of Kraft cheese. Well, Kraft saw this, loved the idea, and decided, we could do that.
Yeah!
And in 1937, they introduced Kraft Dinner, a meal for 4 in 9 minutes for an everyday price of 19 cents.
Okay, guys, here's the tier list before we get into this. Number 1, best mac and cheese from Kraft in the box is definitely, I guess it would be the shells and cheese. That's my favorite. Then second, the SpongeBob mac and cheese is actually so good for no reason at all. And it's not because I'm a big SpongeBob head. I love SpongeBob, but like the shapes are perfect.
1 box could feed a family of 4, or a max of 1. 8 million boxes of Kraft Dinner were sold that first year, and by 1943, 80 million boxes were sold because during World War II, protein from meat and dairy were hard to come by. And that box of mac and cheese packed a lot of protein for just 1 ration coupon.
Cool.
It was also a quick meal for a time when women were working in factories and not at home cooking the complicated meals of years past. And even after the war ended, that quick meal was awful enticing, as one of the radio ads said, "Don't hurry, puff and wheeze. There's a main dish that's a breeze."
Oh!
Kraft dinner first came in a yellow box, and in 1954 they switched over to the blue box.
Dude, there actually is some interesting stuff about food. Like, that was interesting. And then also, I think I remember that when they made the Betty Crocker, I think it might be Betty Crocker. It's one of those, like the cake mixes. They made it so that you had to add an egg, even though you technically didn't really have to, because they wanted people and women to feel like they were still involved with the baking process.
And as popular as Kraft macaroni and cheese is here in the United States, it's actually much more popular under its original name, Kraft Dinner, or now KD, up in Canada, where it's often called the unofficial meal of Canada.
Wait, what? I thought that was an American thing. Wait, what do I call it? I just call it mac and cheese. But I know that some people call it like Kraft Dinner. That's Canadians only? Like, is that a regional exclusive? I have never called it Kraft Dinner or KD. I have literally only ever called it mac and cheese. Canada is America if you're thinking about it. Oh, true. Gotta be KD. Dang! Wait, there's more Canadians in chat than I thought. Hi, everybody!
One thing I find interesting is that today we just take the packet of cheese and mix it with some milk and then the pasta and you're good to go. But in 1938, when it first came out, they actually had recipes to kind of spruce it up. And one of the first recipes had a pinch of cayenne pepper.
Oh, you know what I actually add to mac and cheese that makes it so good? Old Bay. I love Old Bay on mac and cheese. And the first time I went to Wawa and I saw that that was actually an option, my mind was blown. I don't know why I thought I invented that, but I definitely didn't.
Just like the Victorian recipe that I'm about to eat. So once all of the components of the mac and cheese are ready,
I was just so interested in the history, I forgot he had to cook.
put the drained pasta into a dish or a pan and pour the cheese sauce over it, making sure everything is well coated. Then sprinkle on the toasted breadcrumbs and serve. And here we are,
that was easy.
Macaroni à la reine, fancy Victorian mac and cheese. Here we go.
I kind of want some. Gimme, 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 gimme! Also, I like how he's a new
Straight
Pokemon
off,
every
my favorite
time.
part, the breadcrumbs.
Really?
Like a whole loaf of breadcrumbs.
Dude, the only time I actually like the crumb better than the actual like essence of the entire food is on blueberry muffins. I don't know what the hell they add to the top of those, like the little crumble. Oh!
On here, they just add such a wonderful texture. The rest of the texture is like macaroni and cheese. I mean, very, smooth and creamy with the
Sugar and butter?
texture of macaroni. The flavor is really going to depend on what cheese you use.
Yeah.
Because I'm not getting a lot of... I take that back. I am getting some of the mace and the and that cayenne, especially at the very, very end. It takes a second. At first, it's like all I'm tasting is the cheese. And it's wonderful, but like I said, whatever cheese you use, that's the main flavor.
Yeah.
But then you get that mace and that cayenne. What's interesting is it actually reminds me of the rice soup in the Third Class Titanic video.
I don't know if I would like rice soup. Like, I've tried a lot of different rice dishes because I love rice, but I don't know if I would like that. Maybe it's more like risotto? Is that what you think it kind of tastes like?
And thinking back on that, the main ingredients, the flavors there were mace and cayenne, and it's kind of from around the same period. It's about 50 years later, I guess, but that's really interesting. Basically, instead of cheese and macaroni, it's rice and milk with those spices.
Nice.
So you should give this one a shot, or any of the other old macaroni and cheese dishes, and definitely put breadcrumbs. I'm going to start doing that just on
We were
my
talking
Kraft
about that.
macaroni and cheese, because that's really, really fantastic. So make a bowl of mac and cheese, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.
Yay! Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I super appreciate it. If you're new here, please check out the original and come by the Twitch stream, twitch.tv/BerryCrepe. I would super appreciate it. Or you can use code Berry for 10% off your Gamer Subs order, and it super helps me out. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Goodbye, YouTube! Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye!